Tom Daschle. And, the thing is that it says, it gives a reason. It says because of his office, that year, Caiaphas, he prophesied. Same with Tom Daschle. Because of his office, he's representing the nation just like Caiaphas did.
Okay, help me understand this spiritually. We have political leaders unknowingly quoting they know they're quoting Scripture, but they don't understand the spiritual significance of what's coming out of their mouths. We have political and business officials who are doing things in the natural realm, reenacting the very same things that ancient Israel did. They're not aware of it.
Yes.
Okay, Pastor, they're like actors and actresses on the world stage.
Yes.
Explain this to me. How is this happening?
Yeah, it's eerie, and it's because a few things. One, God is sovereign. Two, everything happens. It's under His will, and it is, and the harbingers have to manifest one way or another. They're going to manifest, and so it happens. I mean, some of the harbingers are inanimate objects that happen to happen. Others are the actual words of leaders, but it all has to happen. They don't realize what they're doing, but it has to manifest. And for instance, we've just taken the one thing. For instance, the sycamore. This happened with, a beam that came out of the tower as it just happens to hit a sycamore that just happens to have been planted by other people years before at the corner of Ground Zero. When they replace the tree, it's because someone happened to donate a tree. They had no idea they're donating the very same thing. No one person is in charge of all this. It's the hand of God manifesting the harbingers. And again, in the same way that, Caiaphas said this, one man has to die for the people, and it says he was prophesying, but he didn't realize he was prophesying. It was a double entendre. In fact, here's another interesting thing with this, is that interesting, because before Daschle says what he's about to say, he says this. He prefaces by saying, I know there's only the smallest measure of inspiration, he says. And what he means is, I'm going to inspire you. But the word inspiration, even that is a double entendre, because the word inspiration refers to the Spirit breathing in a word that is a prophetic word, like the Bible. And so here, just before he gives the prophetic word, he says this is going to be from a measure of inspiration. So it even that, and when I shared that, when you heard the one from in 2005, I didn't even share that at that point that the other John Edwards would be the other one. He would do it the same thing, and even he wouldn't realize what he's doing, and he was using a different version of that, a different translation of that. So he apparently didn't even know Tom Daschle did it and linked to 9/11. He had no idea. They just do it because it has to manifest. And when I was, you spoke about like what you were like in shock or stunned when you heard the thing with Daschle. Me too, because what happened was the way the Lord revealed it to me is He was revealing to me, from Ground Zero. First, I saw the tree. I actually was there. That's how it started. And then He led me to Isaiah 9:10. And then I saw the stone, then I read, I found out about the stone and the other tree and everything in this verse was coming true. So I was already led to Isaiah 9:10, but I had no idea that this was actually uttered from Capitol Hill the day after 9/11, or 3 years later on the anniversary of that. So I had no idea. I already was God pinpointed that scripture, and then one day the way it happened with me, I'm pressing the button on the internet. I'm pressing it to find the scripture, just to look up the scripture, Isaiah 9:10, and all of a sudden, instead of coming to the scripture of Isaiah, it goes to the congressional records, Tom Daschle, September 12th. So that's how I got stunned.
Amazing.
And that's how it happened.
Okay, the sycamore tree, the tree was in the backyard of the Colonial Church.
Yeah, we can talk the mystery.
George Washington dedicated the new nation. But I wanted, before we get into that, I wanted to mention that they, after 9/11, when they dug up the remains of the sycamore tree, they took the roots and they hauled the roots of the sycamore tree to a sculptor I think it was in another state, maybe New Hampshire or someplace, and he turned the roots of the sycamore tree into a bronze monument, a sculpture. And they brought the roots of the sycamore tree back to New York City, and they had another ceremony.
Yes. And there's a whole another mystery there that has to do with the second shaking now that links to what they did there. Absolutely. There's to link it together. From Capitol Hill to this now second shaking is Daschle proclaims this thing, and now this is going to lead to the second shaking. And the principle is, and you see it in every commentary, that if the nation rejects this first warning, wake-up call, there's going to come a second one. And the second one is the collapse of the economy, the American economy collapsing in 2008. And the interesting thing is the American government is actually going to take the action that's going to trigger the collapse. And that action was taken in September of 2008, and it was sealed and announced on Wall Street on a Friday night. And that day that they announced that it was going to cause the collapse, right after that, the day that America makes this fateful action, the government does this, was the anniversary of the day that the ancient vow was proclaimed in defiance on Capitol Hill. It was 7 years to the day of when the vow was uttered on Capitol Hill that it set in motion for the economy to collapse. And the thing is, there is a mystery, and you alluded to that statue, that there's a principle that God gives in the Bible that on the days of judgment, the nation's foundation is laid bare, is exposed. And now the foundation of America, of its power, of its financial power, was laid in the late 1800s when there was a secret meeting by the merchants of Wall Street. And they came together, and then they signed this document called the Buttonwood Agreement. And this is the foundation of Wall Street as we know it. From this thing called Buttonwood, they formed the Buttonwood Association, which is later called the New York Stock Exchange. And this is the beginning of the rise of America to financial superpower. And so what was this Buttonwood here? What does that mean? The Buttonwood was a tree under which they signed this covenant that began Wall Street. And so, in fact, Buttonwood is even known. Wall Street, people who are really into Wall Street know that the original name is Buttonwood for Wall Street. So what was the Buttonwood? The Buttonwood was the sycamore tree.
This is amazing.
So here is the symbol on the day of America's foundation of its rise to superpower is the sign of the sycamore, which is the Buttonwood, Wall Street. On 9/11, the sign reappears as the sixth harbinger of the harbingers, and except this time it's struck down. And so here, if the sign of the living sycamore represents the rise of America to superpower, what does the sign of the fallen sycamore mean for America as a financial superpower? It foreshadows the end of that. And then, as you said, they make a statue of that uprooted sycamore, and they put it on display. And they don't put it on display at Ground Zero, where the tree actually fell. They move it to another street, and they put that symbol, the symbol of uprooting, they put it at the end of Wall Street, which is the symbol is the sycamore. It is the sycamore place. They put the sign of the uprooted sycamore, and so here you can see it to this day. It's there. It's there. And another thing, you mentioned about the, actually this goes back to what God said to the prophets. He said, I will expose its foundation. Well, it's right there, exposed to this day, and it happens on 9/11. And there's another scripture where it says, God says, what I have built up, I will break down, and what I have planted, I will uproot. And you see both symbols of that on 9/11. And actually, when they dug up that sycamore, you said they dug up the roots, they found something interesting. That you remember in Isaiah 9:10, it's the two symbols of what fell. One was the bricks have fallen, and the other is the sycamore. Well, in the roots of the sycamore, entwined in its roots, was a brick. You have the two symbols entwined together.
Pastor, there were many other things that happened in the aftermath of 9/11 that if you were paying close attention during those days, you could see the hand of God. Remember the steel beams that made the cross?
Oh, yeah.
It was in the rubble. A lot of people talked about it. Even the news media talked about it. But I remember something else. I remember seeing an interview with some of the first responders, the New York firemen. God bless those men but I remember these firemen and police officers standing in front of the news cameras, and they were telling the world that they found a Bible in the rubble, and the Bible was unharmed, and I remember the firemen saying it was open, if I recall, Jeremiah 11, and well, Jeremiah 11 is about the Tower of Babel, and this fireman, the poor man, I mean, he stood there and he said, you know, this is a sign from God. He's telling us we're going to rebuild these towers. We're going to build them bigger. That's what this means. And I just sat there, Pastor. I was so heartbroken, and my heart's hurting for these firemen and police officers. They're in the rubble. They're trying to rescue people, but they're not understanding the prophetic signs that are there. And the Bible open to Genesis 11 and the Tower of Babel was not a sign from God, you're going to rebuild this tower. It was a sign the Tower of Babel has fallen.
Well, it's interesting because one of the harbingers we don't have time to do all that, but one of the harbingers is, which we didn't do, is that of the tower. And, they attempted, actually, that's one of the harbingers is they're seeking in defiance to build stronger and bigger than ever. And there are people who have come to New York, Christians, and they've watched this thing, which is, it's like the largest harbinger. It's under construction. And they think of the Tower of Babel. So you could see both in this whole thing,
And what is the name of the new tower that's going up at Ground Zero?
Well, originally it was called the Freedom Tower.
But that's not his name now.
Yeah, tell me, say it.
The One World Tower.
World Trade. Yeah.
It's called One World.
Yeah,
One
amazing.
World.
Yeah.
That's what they're building. We're back to Babylon.
Yeah. And you look there, in the wake of 9/11, there are all these. It's like eerie signs. The harbingers, and it's like it's so surrounded by these signs. From for everything to the cross and the whole thing, that it's somebody. There. Even secular people could say there's someone is trying to get our attention, and that is the whole point. And this is a wake up call. These are the alarms of a nation, and one of the mysteries. Because it affects everyone listening now. It affects everyone's pocketbook. It affects everyone's future. That there is in ancient Israel, there's the mystery called the mystery of the Shemitah, and that is that. And Bible students have an idea, but they generally don't know the name of it. Every 7 years, the nation had to rest and had to take a Sabbath rest. The economy stopped. And on the very last day of this year, this Shemitah year, the last day was the day that everything reached its finale. All the nation's financial accounts were wiped away. Its credit wiped away. Debt wiped away. Financial accounts wiped away. And this always happened on a particular day. It was the 29th day of the Hebrew month Elul. It was Elul 29, when the day that the Shemitah, after 7 years, comes to its head and all the finances are wiped away. Now, this is supposed to be a blessing. And for Israel, it was to be a rest and a release. But the thing is, Israel turned away from God. And as they did, and they drove them out of their lives, they drove the Sabbath out of their lives, and they said, we're not going to rest anyway. We're going to pursue money and our idols. And what happens is the Shemitah, the Sabbath year, and this particular day comes back as a day of judgment, a sign of judgment on the nation. And so the Shemitah, comes back, is a sign of judgment on a nation that has driven God out of its life, that has put money ahead of God, and it's a sign that specifically strikes the nation's financial realm. What could this have to do with America? It's not like we're under the law that we have to observe that, but it's the Shemitah as the sign of judgment on a nation that has driven God out of its life. What happens is, we spoke about the first shaking, the first sign, September 11th. The second shaking is different. The first shaking strikes buildings and land. The second shaking strikes the very power of America itself. and that is the collapse of its economy. So the key of the Shemitah is the 7-year cycle. When does the first one come? September 11th, 2001. When did